Welcome to the fifth video tutorial for Learning Music Theory with Logic, Max, and Finale, published by Routledge and written by Jeffrey Kitta. In this video tutorial, we'll discuss triads. We'll discuss triad quality, open and closed triads, interval content of triads, inversions of triads, creating triads in Logic and Finale, triads based on the major and minor scales, otherwise known as the major or minor diatonic collections, the Triad Generator, Triad Identification with Logic and Finale, Triad Identifier, Triad Quiz, and finally accompanying songs with triads. There are four qualities for triads: major, minor, augmented, and diminished. The major and minor qualities are the most common. These four we see here on the screen are all built on middle C, specifically C4, and they are all closed and root position triads. Any triad can be built on any pitch. The lowest note is called the root, the middle note is called the third, and the highest note is called the fifth. Major is abbreviated by MAJ, M, a triangle, or just a capital letter. Minor is abbreviated as MIN, M, or a dash. Augmented is abbreviated as AUG, or the plus symbol, and diminished is abbreviated as DIM, or the degree sign. There are some other possible abbreviations for the qualities. Triads that are spread out larger than one octave are open. The C major triad in the first measure is in closed and root position. The next three C major triads are all in open and root position. We can say that all four triads are voiced differently. We distinguish the qualities of triads by their interval content, and this chart shows the intervals between the notes of the triad, specifically between the root and the fifth, between the third and the fifth, and between the root and the third. We can have major or minor thirds. We can also have perfect, augmented, or diminished fifths. By harmonic inversion of the lower interval, that is between the root and the third, we get the first inversion. By harmonic inversion of the second interval, that is between the third and the fifth, we get the second inversion. Considering the root position and inversions, we have 12 positions of the four triad qualities. Another way to think of this is that when we hear a triad, the lowest note determines if it's in root position, first inversion, or second inversion. This is because how the upper notes are voiced, whether or not the triad is in open or closed position, doesn't change the inversion or the quality of the triad. We can use Logic's chord trigger to create triads. The triads will be root and closed. The list of triads available includes augmented, diminished, major, and minor triads. The list also includes sus2 and sus4 chords. As these are not built entirely in thirds, they are not usually considered triads. To get to this list of triads in chord trigger, we go to the drop-down menu in the top left, and from factory default, we navigate to single, to triads, and then we select one of the qualities. First, we open up chord trigger. Then from the top left drop-down menu, we go to single, triads, and we select the triad. we can use Finale to create triads as well. Write the chord names with the chord tool. Then export that file as a standard MIDI file. And then, once you've exported it, you open that standard MIDI file in Finale. The notation of the chords will then appear. First, we select the chord tool, then we write the chord identifications above the measures. We're going to use a small m for minor. We're going to use DIM for diminished and AUG for augmented. Once we have the chord names written above the measures, we can export this file as a standard MIDI file. And once we have exported that as a standard MIDI file, we're going to open it back up in Finale. We name it and save it on the desktop, for instance, and now we're going to open it in Finale with the File menu, say Open, and find the file. The standard dialog box should work fine, and now we have the triads in notation. We can invert triads with Logic and Finale. In Logic, we use the MIDI transform tool to transpose the lowest pitches up or down 1 octave to invert the chord. In Finale, we can use the canonic utilities to invert chords up or down. We have 5 versions of a G major triad, and to invert them, we open up the canonic utilities for a selected measure, and we say chord inversion up. We apply once to get the first inversion. That same tool, same setting, we apply twice to get the second inversion. To invert the chord down, instead of a chord inversion up, we go chord inversion down. We apply once for the second inversion, and we apply twice for the first inversion. If we limit our notes to a C major scale, we can create triads from the C major scale in this form: 3 major triads, 3 minor triads, and 1 diminished triad. The scale degree names are used for the triads, and also you'll notice that Roman numerals are used for the triads as well. Creating triads from the natural minor scale creates 3 minor triads, 3 major triads, and 1 diminished triad. But the more common minor diatonic collection combines the natural and harmonic minor scale forms to create the triads, as below. Now there are 2 minor triads, 3 major triads, and 2 diminished triads. Here are all the possibilities for triads built on the minor scale. The enclosed triad forms are less common, the one in boxes, but you will sometimes hear them. Notice that the median chord, the 3 chord, has now the possibility for an augmented triad. We can generate the major diatonic collection of triads in Logic by using the chord trigger and setting it to factory default multi-parallel triads. And then we can play the scale degrees 1 through 8, and we will get the major diatonic collection. The Triad Generator will create triads in any position with different voicings. In this case, voicings describes shifting the upper two notes of the triad. The 8 voicings of an A major triad in Triad Generator are shown here. The third and the fifth of the chord are transposed by 1 or 2 octaves in various combinations. Figures are used in harmonic analysis and figured bass to indicate if the triads are inverted. For root position triads, the figure would be 5-3, but usually no figure is used. So without the figure, you know that it's a root position triad. The first inversion triad is shown either with a 6-3, that's the complete figure, but very often just the 6 is used alone. The second inversion of a triad uses the figure of 6-4. When you play a triad into Logic, it identifies the triad in the LCD display. Here you can see that a G augmented triad is being played. Finale's chord analysis tool will also analyze triads and other chords. First, you select the music you want to analyze, and then from the plugins to scoring arranging to chord analysis. If Finale doesn't recognize the triad, as in the case of the third measure here, it indicates a double question mark along with the lowest pitch. FM, to remind ourselves, stands for F minor. The B alone stands for B major. The G plus stands for G augmented. A diminished triad will have a degree sign after the root pitch. Finale indicates inversions by showing the triad name with the lowest pitch after a slash, if it's in first or second inversion. Sometimes mistakes are possible. The B major triad in first and second inversion below are showing the notes of E flat and G flat. But as we know and as we can see, they actually have the pitches D sharp and F sharp. This happens because MIDI represents pitches by number and doesn't distinguish between enharmonic equivalents. To identify triads that are played on an attached MIDI keyboard, we can use the Triad Identifier. It shows the intervals between the notes as semitones and also identifies the root, quality, and inversion. It's not perfect. Sometimes you have to play the chord again for it to properly register. To practice identifying triads by ear, we can use the Triad Quiz. We might want to limit the position to only root or only first or second inversion triads by deselecting the change position toggle. to make the identification easier. Identifying triads can be challenging. It is a good idea to limit the possible chords that we're going to quiz ourselves with to, let's say, root position to start. And we can use Logic's chord trigger to play accompaniments for songs. And in this case, we could use it to play root position triads to accompany the songs. In the music below, if you have a chord trigger set to multi and parallel, and you play those bass notes, you will have the triad sounding. And as you can see, we have two folk songs that could be accompanied in this way.